Today's video, as you can already tell, is different than what I usually upload. Today is not necessarily a role play so much as it is a reading. If you're watching this on the day I post it, it will be March 25th, 2020. March 25th, which is known as Tolkien Reading Day. Tolkien Reading Day, for those of you who don't know, is a day for fans of the author J.R.R. Tolkien to come together and read passages from his writing and to celebrate within his writing the day that Sauron was thrown down by the destruction of the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom. So, I've always wanted to participate in Tolkien Reading Day, but did not previously have a platform to read or do any sort of Tolkien Reading Day post on. So today's video is mostly self-indulgent. So yeah, the Tolkien estate will give a theme each year, a different theme for the fans to take inspiration from. And this year's theme is fellowship. Fellowship and community. Fellowship and community. Both of these are overarching themes throughout Tolkien's writing, but I've obviously spent way too much time as a Tolkien fan. You can see my shelf in the background. As a Tolkien fan from a ripe and tender age, I spent too much time researching, so feel free to get cozy with a cup of tea if you'd like and pay attention, or if you'd like to just listen to my soft voice and let these boring, nerdy ramblings ease you to sleep. It's alright, you can fall asleep to the sound of me nerding off. So, this is my notebook where I write all of my deep philosophical and essay length thoughts. I wrote my notes for my high school thesis in here. That's what these letters say, thesis, and other philosophical, sociological thoughts. So, let's go ahead and dive right in, shall we? Here we are. I'm going to begin our video essay, ASMR, where all good intellectuals should begin, which is definitions. So, fellowship. I would personally define fellowship as an intimate companionship built on a common goal, value, or deep trust, undeterred by situation or misfortune, as selfless love and loyalty. The particular fellowship and community we'll be looking at today is that between Finrod Felagund, and the House of Bëor. I'll be reading from the Silmarillion by J.R. Tolkien and the posthumous book of Beren Luthien, edited by his ever-faithful and very gracious son, Christopher Tolkien. Before I read, just to give some background for anyone who is a new Tolkien fan or perhaps has never encountered Tolkien's work before, there are 3 fathers of the Calaquendi elves who live in the Undying Lands, one of which is Finwë. And Finwë bore 3 sons, Fingolfin, Fëanor, and Finarfin. Finarfin had a son named Finrod. Finarfin is also the father of Galadriel, who you may know from The Lord of the Rings. Galadriel's brother is Finrod. Finarfin's line are marked by their blonde hair, their kind, gentle, peacemaking spirits. Finrod traveled from the Undying Lands to Middle-earth, the land where The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings takes place. There, in the northern realm of Beleriand, Finrod ruled 2 kingdoms. At first, he governed Tol Sirion, which was up on the mountain, until he discovered the caverns along the Narog River. He then established a new kingdom called Nargothrond. This is where he received his second name, Felagund, Master of the Caves. This is the Silmarillion. I own, I think, 4 copies of this book, but this is my most recent copy. It's a new and updated design. The text is the same. I'll be reading from chapter 17 of The Coming of Men into the West. When 300 years and more were gone since the Noldor came to Beleriand, in the days of long peace, Finrod Felagund, Lord of Nargothrond, journeyed east of Sirion and went hunting with Maglor and Maithros, sons of Fëanor. But he wearied of the chase and passed on alone towards the mountains of Eredlindon, and that he saw shining afar, and taking the dwarf road he crossed Gelion at the ford of Sarn Athrod, and turning south over the upper streams of Asgard, he came into the north of Osiriand. In a valley among the foothills of the mountains, below the springs of Thalos, he saw lights in the evening, and far off he heard the sound of song. At this he wondered much, for the green elves of that land lit no fires, nor did they sing by night. At first he feared that a raid of orcs had passed the leaguer of the north, but as he drew near, he perceived that it was not so, for the singers used a tongue that he had not heard before, neither that of dwarves nor of orcs. Then Felagund, standing silent in the night shadow of the trees, looked down into the camp, and there beheld a strange people. Now these were a part of the kindred and following of Beor the Old, as he was afterwards called, a chieftain among men. After many lives of wandering out of the east, he had led them at last over the Blue Mountains, the first of the race of men to enter Beleriand, and they sang because they were glad, and believed that they had escaped from all the perils, and had come at last to a land without fear. Long Felagund watched them, and love for them stirred in his heart, but he remained hidden in the trees until they had all fallen asleep. Then he went among the sleeping people, and sat beside their dying fire where none kept watch. And he took up a rude harp which Beor had laid aside, and he played music upon it, such as the ears of men had not heard, for they had as yet no teachers in the art, save only the dark elves in the wild lands. Now men awoke, and listened to Felagund as he harped and sang, and each thought that he was in some fair dream, until he saw that his fellows were awake also beside him. But they did not speak or stir while Felagund played, because of the beauty of the music and the wonder of the song. Wisdom was in the words of the Elven King, and the hearts grew wiser and hearkened to him. For the things of which he sang, of the making of Arda, and the bliss of Aman beyond the shadows of the sea, became as clear visions before their eyes, and his elvish speech was interpreted in each mind according to its measure. Thus it was that men called King Felagund, whom they first met of all the Eldar, Nom, that is wisdom, in the language of that people, and after they named his folk Nomin, the wise. Indeed, they believed at first that Felagund was one of the Valar, of whom they had heard rumor that they dwelt far in the east, and this was, some say, the cause of their journeying. But Felagund dwelt amongst them, and taught them true knowledge, and they loved him, and took him for their lord, and were ever after loyal to the house of Finarfin. Now the Eldar were beyond all other peoples skilled in tongues, and Felagund discovered also that he could read in the minds of men such thoughts as they wished to reveal in speech, so that their words were easily interpreted. It is said also that these men had long had dealings with the dark elves east of the mountains, and from them had learned much of their speech, since all the languages of the Quendi were of one origin. The language of Beor and his folk resembled the elven tongue in many words and devices. It was not long, therefore, before Felagund could hold converse with Beor, and while he dwelt with him, they spoke much together. But when he questioned him concerning the arising of men in their journeys, Beor would say little, and indeed he knew little, for the fathers of his people had told few tales of their past, and a silence had fallen upon their memory. "A darkness lies behind us," Beor said, "and we have turned our backs upon it, and we do not desire to return thither, even in thought. Westwards our hearts have been turned, and we believe that there we shall find light." Now Felagund learned from Beor that there were many other men of like mind who were also journeying westward. "Others of my own kin have crossed the mountains," he said, "and they were wandering not far away, and the Haladin, a people from whom we are sundered in speech, are still in the valleys of the eastern slopes, awaiting tidings before they venture further. There are yet other men, whose tongue is more like to ours, with whom we've had much dealings at times. They were there before us on the westward march, but we passed them, for they are a numerous people, and yet keep together and move slowly, being ruled over by one chieftain, whom they call Marek." Now the green elves of Osiriand troubled by the coming of men, and when they heard that a lord of the Eldar from over the sea was among them, they sent messengers to Felagund. "Lord," they said, "if you have power over these newcomers, bid them return by the ways that they came, or else go forward, for we desire no strangers in this land to break the peace in which we live. And these folk are hewers of trees and hunters of beasts, therefore we are their unfriends, and if they will not depart, we shall afflict them in all ways that we can." Then, by the advice of Felagund, Beor gathered all the wandering families and kindreds of his people, and they removed over Gelion and took up their abode in the lands of Amrod and Amras, upon the east banks of the Kellon, south of Nan Elmoth, near the borders of Doriath. And the name of that land thereafter was Estolad, the encampment. But when, after a year had passed, Felagund wished to return to his own country, Beor begged leave to come with him, and he remained in the service of the king of Nargothrond while his life lasted. In this way he got his name, Beor, whereas his name before had been Balan, for Beor signified vassal in the tongue of his people. The rule of his folk he committed to Beren, his elder son, and he did not return again to Estolad. Felagund himself often returned to visit men, and many other elves of the West Lands, both Noldor and Sindar, journeyed to Estolad, being eager to see the Edain, whose coming had been foretold. Now Atani, the second people, was the name given to men in Valinor, and the lore that told of their coming. But the speech of Beleriand, that name became Edain, and it was used only of the three kindreds of the elf friends. The years of the Edain were lengthened, according to the reckoning of men, after their coming to Beleriand. But at last Beor the Old died when he lived 93 years, for 44 which he had served King Felagund, and then he lay dead, of no wound or grief, but stricken by age. The Eldar saw for the first time the swift waning of the life of men, and the death of weariness they knew not in themselves, and they grieved greatly for the loss of their friends. But Beor at last had relinquished his life willingly, and passed in peace, and the Eldar wondered much at the strange fate of men, for in all their lore there was no account of it, and its end was hidden from them. So that was our first reading. Introducing us to Finrod Felagund, who generously teaches the people of Beor, and especially befriends their captain Beor. Now we will see how Beor's descendants continue a friendship, or in this case, fellowship, with Finrod Felagund. In chapter 18, which we will read in a second, a battle occurs between the forces of both men and elves against the enemy Morgoth. This battle, the Battle of Sudden Flame, also known as the Dagor Bragaloch, is an unexpected firestorm where Balrogs, as seen in The Lord of the Rings, whole legions of them, evil fire spirits and Glaurung, a great dragon, appear against the forces of men and elves. In the next reading, we will jump at first into the Dagor Bragolach, the Battle of Sudden Flame. In this battle, elves and men wage war against the great enemy Morgoth. And Morgoth surprises them with his legions of Balrogs. You may be familiar with the Balrog from the Mines of Moria if you've watched or read The Lord of the Rings. Just imagine entire legions of Balrogs, and not only Balrogs, but a great dragon named Glaurung as well. Yes, Glaurung. These spirits of fire arrive to the battle and turn the tide in Morgoth's favor. Chapter 18 of the Ruin of Beleriand. The sons of Finarfin bore most heavily the brunt of the assault, and Angrod and Agnor were slain. Beside them fell Bregolas, lord of the House of Bëor, and a great part of the warriors of that people. But Barahir, brother of Bregolas, was in the fighting further westward, near to the pass of Sirion. There, King Finrod Felagund, hastening from the south, was cut off from his people, and surrounded with a small company in the fen of Serek. He would have been slain, or taken, but Barahir came up with the bravest of his men, and rescued him, and made a wall of spears about him, and they cut their way out of the battle with great loss. Thus Felagund escaped, and returned to his deep fortress in Nargothrond, but swore an oath of abiding friendship and aid in every need to Barahir and all his kin. And in a token of his vow, he gave Barahir his ring. Barahir was now by right the lord of the House of Bëor, and he returned to Dorthonion, but most of his people fled from their homes and took refuge in the fastness of Ithlam. The ring of Barahir is actually something that Lord of the Rings fans, even just those who've seen the movie, will be familiar with. The ring of Barahir is made of Beren Luthien. Among the tales of sorrow and of ruin that come down to us from the darkness of those days, there are yet some in which amid weeping there is joy, and under the shadow of death, light that endures. And of these histories, most fair still in the ears of the elves is the tale of Beren and Luthien. Of their lives was made the Lay of Luthien, release from bondage, which is the longest save one of the songs concerning the world of old. But here the tale is told in fewer words and without song. It has been told that Barahir would not forsake Dorthonion, and there Morgoth pursued him to death, until at last there remained to him only 12 companions. Now, the forest of Dorthonion rose southward to the mountainous moors, and in the east of those highlands there lay a lake, Tarnailuin, with wild heaths about it, and all that land was pathless and untamed, for even in the days of the long peace none had dwelt there. But the waters of Tarnailuin were held in reverence, for they were clear and blue by day, and by night were a mirror for the stars. And it was said that Melian herself had hallowed that water in the days of old. Thither Barahir and his outlaws withdrew, and there made their lair, and Morgoth could not discover it. But the rumour of the deeds of Barahir and his companions went far and wide, and Morgoth commanded Sauron to find them and destroy them. Among the companions of Barahir was Gollum, son of Angrim. His wife was named Eilionel, and their love was great ere evil befell. But Gollum, returning from the war, upon the marches found his house plundered and forsaken, and his wife gone, whether slain or taken he knew not. Then he fled to Barahir, and of his companions he was the most fierce and desperate, but doubt gnawed at his heart, thinking that perhaps Eilionel was not dead. At times he would depart alone and secretly, and visit his house that still stood among the fields and woods where he once possessed. And this became known to the servants of Morgoth. On a time of autumn he came in dusk of evening, and drawing near he saw, as he thought, a light at the window. And coming warily he looked within. There he saw Eilionel, and her face was worn with grief and hunger, and it seemed to him that he heard her voice lamenting that he had forsaken her. But even as he cried aloud, the light was blown out in the wind, the wolves howled, and on his shoulders he felt the sudden heavy hands of Sauron's hunters. Thus Gollum was ensnared, and taking him to their camp they tormented him, seeking to learn the hidings of Barahir and all his ways. In this way the hiding of Barahir was revealed, and Morgoth drew his net about it, and the orcs, coming in the still hours before dawn, surprised the men of Dorthonion, and slew them all, save one. For Beren, son of Barahir, had been sent by his father on a perilous errand, to spy upon the ways of the enemy, and he was far afield when the lair was taken. But as he slept benighted in the forest, he dreamt that carrion birds sat thick as leaves upon bare trees beside a mere, and blood dripped from their beaks. Then Beren was aware in his dream of a form that came to him from across the water, and it was a wraith of Gollum, and it spoke to him declaring his treachery and death, and bade him make haste to warn his father. Then Beren awoke and sped through the night, and came back to the lair of the outlaws on the second morning. But as he drew near, the carrion birds arose from the ground, and sat in the alder trees beside Tarnailuin, and croaked in mockery. There Beren buried his father's bones, and raised a cairn of boulders above him, and swore oath upon it of vengeance. First, therefore, he pursued the orcs that had slain his father and his kinsmen and he found their camp by night at Rivel's Well, above the fen of Serric. And because of his woodcraft he came near to their fire unseen. There their captain made boast of his deeds, and he held up the hand of Barahir that he had cut off as a token for Sauron that their mission was fulfilled. And the ring of Felagund was on that hand. Then Beren sprang from behind a rock and slew the captain. And taking the hand and the ring he escaped, being defended by fate, for the orcs were dismayed, and their arrows wild. It's after this time that Beren, now in possession of Barahir's ring, crosses through a particularly dark part of the forest and mountains. There he sees many horrors, but persists until he enters an enchanted wood, where the famous meeting of Beren and Luthien takes place as she's dancing under the starlight in the trees in her beautiful blue dress, like there's stars in her hair. And Beren falls in love, and Luthien falls for him also. When they approach Luthien's father about marriage, he sends Beren on a mission that is impossible and is very likely to end in his death. A mission to return with a Silmaril, one of 3 cursed gems made by Feanor, uncle of Finrod. Beren knows he cannot do this on his own, and therefore seeks the aid that is promised to his father. Now I'm going to read a bit of verse from the Lay of Luthien. I'm going to do my best, but poetry reading is not something I do regularly, so have mercy on me. Thus Felagund and Nargothrond still reigned, a hidden king whose bond was sworn to Barahir the Bold. And now his son through forest cold wandered alone as in a dream. Iskalduin's dark and shrouded stream he followed, till its waters frore were joined to Sirion hoar, pale silver water wide and free, rolling in splendor to the sea. And now Beren came unto the pools, wide shallow meres where Sirion cools his gathered tide beneath the stars. Ere chafed and sundered by the bars of reedy banks a mighty fen, he feeds and trenches, plunging then into vast chasms underground, where many miles this way is wound. Umboth Muilin, twilight meres, whose great waters wide grey as tears, the elves then named. Through driving rain from thence across the guarded plain, the hills of the hunters Beren saw, with bare tops bitten bleak and raw by western winds. But in the mist of streaming rains that flashed and hissed in the meres he knew there lay, beneath those hills, the cloven way of Narog, and watchful halls of Felagund beside the falls of Ingwil tumbling from the wold. And everlasting watch they hold, the gnomes of Nargothrond renowned, and every hill is tower crowned, where wardens sleepless peer and gaze, guarding the plains and all the ways, between Narog swift and Sirion pale. The archers whose arrows never fail, though range the woods and secret kill all who creep thither against their will. Yet now he thrusts into that land, bearing the gleaming ring upon his hand of Felagund, and oft doth cry, here comes no wandering orc or spy, but Beren, son of Barahir, who once Felagund was dear. So ere he reached the eastward shore of Narog, that doth foam and roar o'er boulders black, those archers green came round him. When the ring was seen, they bowed before him, though his plight was poor and beggarly. And by night they led him northward, for no ford nor bridge was built where Narog poured before the gates of Nargothrond, and friend nor foe might pass beyond. To northward where the stream yet young more slender flowed, below the tongue of foam-splashed land that Ginglith pens when her brief golden torrent ends and joins the Narog, there they wade. Now swiftest journey thence they made to Nargothron's sheer terraces and dim gigantic palaces. They came beneath a sickle moon to doors there darkly hung and hewn, with posts and lintels of ponderous stone and timbers huge. Now open throne were gaping gates, and in they strode where Felagund on throne abode. Fair were the words of Narog's king to Beren, and his wandering and all his feuds and bitter wars recounted soon. Behind closed doors they sat, while Beren told his tale of Doriath, and his words him fail, recalling Luthien dancing fair, with the wild white roses in her hair, remembering her elven voice that rung while stars in twilight round her hung. He spake of Thingol's marvellous halls by enchantment lit, where fountain falls, and ever the nightingale doth sing to Melian and to her king. The quest he told that Thingol laid in scorn on him, how for love of maid more fair than ever was born to men of Tenuthia of Luthien. He must essay the burning waste, and doubtless death and torment taste. This Felagund in wonder heard, and heavily spoke at last his word. It seems that Thingol doth desire thy death. The everlasting fire of those enchanted jewels all know is cursed with an oath of endless woe, and Feanor's sons alone by right are lords and masters of their light. He cannot hope within his hoard to keep this gem, nor is he lord of all the folk of Elveness. And yet thou say'st for nothing less can thy return to Doriath be purchased? Many a dreadful path is sooth there lies before thy feet, and after Morgoth still a fleet untiring hate, as I well know, would hunt thee from heaven unto hell. Feanor's sons would, if they could, slay thee or ever thou reach this wood, or laid in Thingol's lap that fire, or gained at least thy sweet desire. Lo, Celegorm and Curfin dwell here in this very realm within. Even though I, Finrod's son, am king, a bower mighty have won, and many of their folk lead. Friendship to me in every need they have yet shown, but much I fear that to Beren son of Barahir mercy or love they will not show, if once thy dreadful quest they know. Then Felagund took off his crown, and at his feet he cast it down, the silver helm of Nargothrond. Yours ye may break, but I my bond must keep, and kingdom here forsake. If hearts here were that did not quake, or that to Finrod's son were true, then I at least should find a few to go with me, not like a poor rejected beggar's scorn endure, turned from my gates to leave my town, my people, and my realm and crown. At this point in the story of Beren and Luthien, Finrod and Beren go on together, disguised by Beren's woodcraft and Finrod's elven magic as orcs, but they are intercepted by Sauron, who in the Lay of Luthien is called Thu. Thu intercepts them, questions them, and realizes that although they appear to be orcs, they are certainly not friends of his, and he questions them before his throne. But no true man or elf yet free would ever speak that blasphemy, and Beren muttered, Who is Thu to hinder work that is to do? Him we serve not, nor to him owe obeisance, and we now would go. Thu laughed. Patience, not very long shall ye abide, but first a song I will sing to you to ears intent. Then his flaming eyes on them bent, and darkness black fell round them all. Only they saw, as through a pall of eddying smoke, those eyes profound, in which their senses choked and drowned. He chanted a song of wizardry, of piercing, opening, of of treachery, revealing, uncovering, betraying. Then sudden, Felagund their swaying sang in answer a song of staying, resisting, battling against power, of secrets kept, strength like a tower, and of trust unbroken, freedom, escape, of changing and of shifting shape, of snares eluded, broken traps, the prisoning opening, the chain that snaps. Backwards and forwards swayed their song, reeling and foundering as ever more strong. Those chanting swelled, Felagund fought, and all the magic and might he brought of elfiness into his words. Softly in the gloom they heard the birds, singing afar in Nargothrond, the sighing of the sea beyond the western world on sand of pearls in elven land. Then the gloom gathered, darkness growing, in Valinor the red blood flowing, beside the sea where the gnomes slew the foam riders, and stealing drew their white ships with their white sails from lamplit havens. The wind wails, the wolves howl, the ravens flee, the ice mutters in the mouth of the sea. The captives saddening band mourn, thunder rumbles, the fires burn, a vast smoke gushes out a roar, and Felagund swoons upon the floor. Behold, they are in their own fair shape, fair-skinned, bright-eyed, no longer gape orc-like with their mouths, and now they stand betrayed into the wizard's hand. Thus came they unhappily into woe, to dungeons no hope nor glimmer know, or chained in chains that eat the flesh, and woven in webs of strangling mesh they lay forgotten in despair. Yet not all availing were the spells of Felagund, for Thune neither knew their names nor purpose. These much he pondered and bethought, and in their woeful chains them sought, and threatened all with dreadful death, if no one would with traitor's breath reveal this knowledge. Wolves should come and slow devour them one by one before the others' eyes, and last should one alone be left aghast. Then, in a place of horror hung, with anguish should his limbs be wrung, in the bowels of the earth be slow, endlessly, cruelly put to woe and torment, till all he declared. Even as he threatened, so it fared. From time to time in the eyeless stark, two eyes would grow, and they would hark to frightful cries, and then a sound of rending, a slavering on the ground, and blood flowing they would smell, but none would yield, and none would tell. That's the end that we'll be reading from The Lay of Luthien in Beren Luthien. Now we'll go on to our final reading before I give my overall thoughts. And this reading, we return to the Silmarillion form of Beren Luthien. Now Beren and Finrod are, as read in The Lay of Luthien, waiting to die at the hands of, or should I say the teeth of, a great wolf in Sauron's dungeon. But not all hope is lost, for Luthien escaped her father's restraints, and allied with a great hound named Huon, they travel to go save Beren. In the pits of Sauron, Beren and Felagund lay, and all their companions were now dead. But Sauron purposed to keep Felagund to the last, for he perceived that he was a Noldo of great might and wisdom, and he deemed that in him lay the secret of their errand. But when the wolf came for Beren, Felagund put forth all his power, and burst his bonds, and he wrestled with the werewolf, and slew it with his hands and teeth. Yet he himself was wounded to the death. Then he spoke to Beren, saying, I go now to my long rest in the timeless halls beyond the seas and the mountains of Aman. It will be long ere I am seen among the Noldor again, and it may be that we shall not meet a second time, in life or death. For the fates of our kindreds are apart. Farewell. He died then in the dark, in Tolkien Reading, whose great tower he himself had built. Thus King Finrod Felagund, fairest and most beloved of the House of Finwë, redeemed his oath, but Beren mourned beside him in despair. Then Luthien stood upon the bridge and declared her power, and the spell was loosed that bound stone to stone, and the gates were thrown down, and the walls opened, and the pits laid bare, and many thralls and captives came forth in wonder and dismay, shielding their eyes against the pale moonlight, for they had laid long in the darkness of Sauron. But Beren came not. Therefore Huan and Luthien sought him in the isle, and Luthien found him mourning by Felagund. So deep was his anguish that he lay still, and did not hear her feet. Then thinking him already dead, she put her arms about him, and fell into a dark forgetfulness. But Beren, coming back to the light, and out of the pits of despair, lifted her up, and they looked again upon one another, and the day rising over the dark hills shone upon them. They buried the body of Felagund upon the hilltop of his own isle, and it was clean again, and the green grave of Finrod, Finarfin's son, fairest of all the princes of the elves, remained inviolate, until the land was changed and broken, and foundered under the destroying seas. But Finrod walks with Finarfin his father, beneath the trees of Eldamar. Beren and Luthien will go on to claim the Silmaril from Morgoth, and after Beren's tragic death, they are reunited, the first of three sacred elf-mortal romances. And like I said, although the tale of Beren and Luthien is regarded highly for the romantic elements and close ties to Tolkien's personal life, Finrod's importance to the story cannot be undermined. Without him, Beren would not have made it out of Sauron's dungeon. In a land where even amongst elves there is classism and prejudice, Finrod always chooses generosity and loyalty. Loyalty and kindness to a strange people, a people so utterly different from those that he knew, and he taught them without arrogance, and continued to minister and support Beor's house over 3 generations of men. While Finrod's kindness did repay him, his intention was never to be repaid. He only ever aimed to serve others rightly and wisely. So, how did we define fellowship? An intimate companionship built on a common goal, value, or deep trust, undeterred by situation or misfortune, a selfless love and loyalty. Finrod is the embodiment of true fellowship, in a way mortals couldn't quite dream of. He's blessed with immortality against age and disease, and therefore has the unique opportunity to dedicate his everlasting health and energy to others, and to sacrifice eternity to prolong even just a few more months of life in the life of the mortals that he loves. Finrod chooses not only to serve Beor, but Beor's descendants